Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner, and welcome to the Gruber Roadster Roundtable
Yes.
podcast.
And a very special guest today. We have Mark Webb Johnson, all the way overseas in China, who is joining us to talk about OVMS.
Now, we have a couple of technical updates I wanted to make sure to share with people too. On Instagram, you're going to be able to hear Mark Webb Johnson, but you will not be able to see him. Welcome to our people from Instagram. Our technical upgrades recently made it so that you could get back on. On TikTok, we've done technical upgrades as well, and very proud to say that you will be able to see Mark and hear the entire conversation.
So Mark is a longtime fixture in the Roadster community. He developed, his team and him developed an OVMS open vehicle management system. And you know what? At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and have him tell us a little bit more about who he is, what he does, what his background is, and what OVMS does for a Roadster.
Morning, guys.
Good morning, Mark.
So who am I? I live in Hong Kong, a little bit south of China. Been living here. Well, I was born here, but I guess I'm British by nationality. I'm a technician, so I deal with computers, software and hardware, computer security primarily as a day job. And I was very fortunate to be one of the early Roadster owners in Hong Kong. I think in the end, we had about 30 or 40 Roadsters out here, all right-hand drive. And it's just a fantastic community. I mean, every owner here was just fantastic. You know, we had some celebrities, but mostly it was technical people from technical industries, you know, satellite engineers or entrepreneurs. And that's how I got involved with Tesla, basically from the Roadster, from a technology point of view.
The early adopters of Tesla were definitely a unique breed of individuals. They were brave, they were daring, they were willing to bet on a company that was looking like they were going bankrupt. They were willing to have a company overcommit and underdeliver endlessly. But, you know, they hung in there. And you're right, it is one of the most interesting automotive communities we've ever been affiliated with. So tell us about the whole concept of Tesla service people being able to originally tune into a Roadster to get some information, and then why it went away and what you developed and how it's restored currently and what its features are.
Okay, so yeah, the original Roadster had I think all of them did. They had a 2G modem. So it was very early days. It's the central computer called the VMS in the Roadster. Has a little cellular modem in it, and it had no Wi-Fi or anything, but just this modem. And it allowed Tesla to basically remotely connect over the network into the Roadster. So they could extract logs, they could get in and tweak settings remotely if they needed to. So it was very early days. But there was no access to the end users. You know, I think all we could do as an end user was just turn this on or off. You know, if we were concerned about privacy, we turn it off. Otherwise, you'd leave it on as a default. And and most of the time, I found that Tesla would, you know, if you reported a problem, they'd say, "Could you upload the log files?" So you would put a USB stick in, you'd get the log files, which were, I think, a megabyte or so, and then you'd upload it to a website they had. So they didn't really seem to use that 2G connection very much, but they paid for the network and everything. So it was all very good. I think around 2011, there was an interesting guy. I mean, there was two guys involved in the community, both one in America, who produced a thing called the Tesla Tatler. And this was a little SMS box. So it was another little Linux box that you'd plug into your Roadster. And you'd send it SMS messages. So you'd send it a stats message and it would return back, you know, this is the status of the battery. And to his credit, this guy Scott, he released a whole bunch of information on what he'd found out about the Roadster. So he'd taken out the VDS and he'd reverse engineered it. And he produce some information on, to get the community started. And then another guy, Michael, I think he was somewhere in Europe. I think he was Holland or somewhere like that. Brilliant guy. I mean, he took a little PIC microcontroller, and this is kind of like between DOS and modern day computers. But the PIC microcontroller, to give you an idea, is 64 kilobytes of program memory. I think a little about 1,500 bytes of RAM. It was a tiny little microcontroller. And everything, a microcontroller is like a normal computer, but everything is on one chip. So the RAM, the flash memory, the CPU is all on one chip. And he made this tiny little board with, I think, something called RCM, the Roadster Charge Monitor. And this would do similar to what Tesla Tatler could do. You could send it a message stat, and it would reply, what the status of the car was. So my good friend Sunny in Hong Kong and I decided, well, let's take this further. We want smartphone apps. At the time, I think Nissan Leaf had an app. They were the only people who had an app. The Model S was still not yet produced at that time, and there was no app on the Tesla. But Tesla were talking about the Model S app at the time. So what we did was we used a slightly more modern PIC processor. It had, I think, 96 kilobytes of RAM rather than 64.
Wow.
And a little 2G modem. And we produced a prototype OVMS with, I think we built, the initial production run was 20 units or something. And we wrote the software in 3 parts. So we wrote the software that ran on the actual, in the car, on the module and the PIC. And then we wrote a server that it would connect to, because obviously you need something to sit between the car and the user, maybe to translate and to deal with the 2 different networks. And then the third part was a smartphone app. We wrote one app for Android and one app for iPhones, and that's how it grew. And from there, some other people got involved. Pretty quickly, Michael, the Roadster Charge Monitor, the RCM guy, he got involved and helped us out in the initial stage. And that was version 1 of the OVMS product. I mean, it's not really a product; it's more a community project.
Fascinating. So a number of people were involved, it sounds like. The early version of the 2G capability that Tesla had, if an owner was able to get past the password-protected portion of the Roadster, which was well protected for many years, would they be able to tap into the same level that Tesla did?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting how, if you look at the Roadster, I mean, it's although the techniques were not known, there is almost no security on the VMS. I mean, the VMS is one user root, no password.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So, if you know the actual technique to get into VMS is not difficult. It's interesting. I think about a year or so into the project, we actually spoke to Tesla. I mean, we initially asked them, are you going to object if we do this? And the only objection that they said, no, wonderful, thank you very much. And the only objection they had was they were concerned that we were actually writing a program to run inside the VMS and to use their network. Okay. As soon as we said, no, this is separate hardware, and then they had no objection.
Excellent. Very good. So the OVMS unit that is currently available, I have to say, we're in the service business, has rescued and saved more Roadsters than I can tell you. An OVMS system installed alerts the owner that there's a problem with the Roadster. And it's typically the type of message where, my charging stopped, a thunderstorm rolled through, and a circuit breaker tripped. Of course, it doesn't give you that level of detail. It tells you that it stopped charging. Yeah. And now it gives you the option. You're sitting on in the south of France, and you can notify, text, or call someone home and say, go over and reset that circuit breaker, save my car. So it has been a wonderful tool. Now, as this thing had evolved, We went into, you were saying that you initially built a 3G version, right? Tell us about the
The
evolution.
initial, yeah, the initial version was 2G.
Okay.
And that lasted for many years. I mean, the 2G networks, even today, are still around because for this sort of thing, where it's very low volume of data, all you're sending is just, status messages.
Okay.
2G is actually perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question there. So, yeah, this is one of the questions that was asked. If somebody has a 2G version of the OVMS, do they need to replace the entire box, or is an upgrade available to them?
So there's three versions of OVMS. There's the original prototype. I don't know if you have a picture of that you can show people what it is. We've got a nice one of a Christmas tree, which was, I think it was 2011, of the first units coming out just before Christmas.
We'll pop that up. That one should be easy to find. There's some production kit. Is that what you said? Yeah, it was right by a Christmas tree. You'll see some tinsel and some Christmas globes. So that was what we're
anyway.
about
So
to
that was
see.
the first version was based on a 2G modem because that was all that was available at the time.
Okay.
But then within a few years, these things were all hand built essentially. I mean, it would be Stunning and I on a Sunday sitting down and with soldering irons and soldering the vehicle cables in place. And pretty quickly, this got too big. I mean, there was too many Roadster owners calling us saying, "Can we buy the hardware?" I mean, we released, everything is open in OVMS, all the source code, all the schematics, all the hardware schematics, everything's open, and people could, and some people did build their own. They design their own circuit or send it off to a circuit manufacturer, and they'd make the boards. But most people just came to us and said, "Please, can you just include me in the next batch?" And we build batches of these things. But the first version was just too much work. It was hand soldering these little vehicle cables and hand crimping the connectors became a pain in the neck. So, being close to China, we were very close to the manufacturing there, and it became easier to make a version 2, which was it was smaller. It was about a quarter the size of the version 1. It was manufactured in a metal case with a manufactured, sealed vehicle cable, which we didn't have to hand solder and hand crimp.
Right.
And, but again, so both the version 1 and the version 2 were using 2G technology.
So I'm going to bring up that image real quick.
Yeah, so that's the first. And you can see in there that blue cable sticking through a hole in the white casing it was a real pain in the neck. Yeah.
Okay.
But everything there's, I think it's hot glued to keep it strong and secure. So that was the first version, which was the hand built. Then version 2 was much more professional, but still limited to 2G. And then we started this went on for several years before it became an issue. But basically, some of the countries started threatening to turn off the 2G networks. Of course, all the IoT, the Internet of Things manufacturers who were all using 2G got annoyed and sort of pleaded to them. But it was clear that the end was nigh. So at that point, we switched to a version 3, which would be the same, externally manufactured in batches unit. But by now, our initial, we were building, that's a batch of 6 under a Christmas tree. Then in version 2, we're up into batches of 20 or 50. And by version 3, we're building these in the hundreds. And we switched to a much more powerful processor called the ESP32, which is a very, very nice processor. It had 16 megabytes of flash memory. I think about 700 kilobytes of RAM or something, a lot more RAM. It's got a Wi-Fi on board. And at that point, we switched to having a base module which supported Wi-Fi and then a plug-in modem. And the modem, the first modem we had for it was a 3G modem. And then in recent years, we've also, I think last year, we also released a 4G option. So if 3G is being discontinued in your region, you can switch to 4G. And all the modems were backwards compatible. So, the 2G modem was just 2G. The 3G modem is 2G or 3G. And the 4G modem is 2G or 3G or 4G across, I don't know how many frequency bands. I think the initial one was 4 bands, and now we're up to more than a dozen frequency
Okay.
bands to work worldwide.
And so with the 3G, I know here in the United States, 3G is on its way to being discontinued. A lot of people
Yeah.
with Tesla Model S's, for example, that have the 3G card in their MCU are coming back to either Tesla or sometimes even to us and getting the upgraded chip and the upgraded 4G LTE modem to put into that.
Yeah. So I think that was the long answer. The short answer is if you've got a version 3, which, it looks like this. I guess if I can hold one up. Yeah, that's what a version 3 looks like. This one is upgradable. So you can take out the modem and you can put in a new modem. And should 4G go the way of the dinosaurs, we can put in a 5G modem. Yeah, it's a upgradable design.
So somewhere along the way also, Mark, you guys added some features to the OBMS box, like the KPM, let's see if I can find it here, the TPMS board. And
Yes.
yeah, can you tell us a bit about that? What prompted that? What does it do? How is it useful?
Well, pretty much. I mean, I think the development team now has grown from what it was. I mean, initially it was, I think, 3 guys, and then pretty quickly a few others came on. Some amazing people, like Stephen Kasner, who sadly passed away last year. Tom Saxton. It's difficult to individually name developers because there are hundreds of them now. But each of these developers had some sort of itch he wanted to scratch in English. I think the American has the same expression. So, I mean, one of the itches I had was a parking timer. We have to pay for parking here by the hour. And the worst thing is if you leave your car on a meter for too long, you get a bill. So, we had it in the app. It would detect when the car was parked, and it would start a timer. So in the app, you can see, okay, I've been parked for 1 hour, 15 minutes. And you know when to go back and put in some more money in the meter.
Right.
Another guy had this, he was concerned about his vehicle being bricked, when he left it alone for a long time. So even though we have notifications for if a vehicle, if the charging is interrupted, whatever, but if it's not plugged in, the battery will slowly go down, the SoC will go down over time. And he coded some code. If it ever gets to 4%, OVMS will do whatever it can to notify you. It'll try SMS, it'll try push notifications,
Right.
It'll just really, really try to get you to deal with it before it gets to 0.
Excellent. Yeah.
So, each of these things were just like an itch being scratched. And one that came up reasonably late in the project was the TPMS. Tesla had a tool, because basically what was happening, either the sensors there was a few edge cases of what's the problem with the TPMS in the Tesla Roadster, particularly the version 2 Tesla Roadsters. The first is, if your sensor died, you would have you'd have to put a new sensor in with a different ID. And then you'd have to teach the car about the new ID. And that had to be done over this K-line protocol, which is not the normal CAN bus protocol the Roadster uses. A second edge case is that the Roadster TPMS has 2 antennas, one in the back, one in the front. And they run off another type of communication bus called a LIN bus. And that communication can be flaky. It's under the car being attacked by, road dust and gravel being spit up at it all the time, and moisture. And if the connection's slightly wet, it can misinterpret a request. And the request may be, tell me the tire pressure. And that request gets interrupted or, confused. And what it sees is, here are your new tire IDs. So the antenna basically gets corrupted and loses if you look at what the tire ID is like, they look like 32 degrees centigrade and 30 psi rather than the normal ID number. So the value has obviously been corrupted. And for years, Tesla, my own Roadster went in for this like 2 or 3 times. And every time Tesla would change the antenna under warranty.
Really? Okay.
And the problem actually can be solved just by reprogramming the antenna. So it can be worked around.
Right.
And then the third problem was that this special tool used to plug into the car and reprogram the little ECU, we call it, the control unit for the TPMS, became unavailable or very, very hard to get. So we reverse engineered the protocol. I mean, it's a K-line protocol. It wasn't very hard. There's only 3 or 4 messages or types of messages. And then we built a little tiny circuit board. I think you have a picture of it, but it's a little board that plugs into the expansion port of a version 3 OVMS, and that allows you to read and write the sensors on the car.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite cool in that you can sort of you can say, hey, read me the sensors and store them as summer, as a name summer. And then you can put your winter tires in. You can say, okay, program the car based on the winter tire set now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You know, guys, if you bring up our e-store, the pictures that Mark is referring to, we can see the K-line board there, for example. And I would also reach out to the audience, those of you that are joining us from the Roadster world. If you have questions about the images popped up or any technical questions, feel free to ask them. As you point out, Mark, these TPMS sensors have little batteries inside them, and they don't last forever. And when they do go bad, they start to report errors, and it's a common replacement. Are we getting that picture up there of the e-store portion?
Yeah, I'm pulling that up right now. Great. No.
There we go. Okay. And if you go down a little bit, there's a larger picture of that TPMS board. There it is, the add-on option. There we go. So that's the little board that you guys created, and then that was that available in the 3G version or just in 4G?
Both 3G and 4G. So as long as it's a version 3 OVMS, which is the black plastic case.
Okay. And
then it will work.
I believe that our e-store, when I looked at this earlier, it talks about 3G, and I believe we're buying the 4G versions now, so we're going to update that as well.
Now, Jesse, if I can get your help here real quick too. We have a question on Instagram where it says, is there any way I could see those photos? Because, of course, Instagram is just seeing a green screen. They're not seeing the website behind us. So what is the web address for people to be able to get to that particular web page and see the photos that we're talking about?
Sure. And Richard, we are plugged in Instagram. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Through the mics? Okay.
Correct.
So the web address is grubermotors.com/product/OVMS-unit. And I think for the rest of the people, I can put that in the chat. We can add those to the chats, but maybe we can do that for Instagram too.
Yeah, I can go and throw that link in Instagram. It was Bambi Bike Life Ying. And I did let them know in the chat to go ahead and head on over to YouTube, and it looks like they're joining us on YouTube as well now, so they can see the green screen with all the images as well.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. By the way, before we get back into the OVMS, that picture behind us, we usually describe what's going on there. We've recently been using AI, Mark, to generate our images, thumbnails for videos, and it's remarkable what it's able to conjure. I think the portion of intelligence in that phrase is an oxymoron, because sometimes you wonder, is it hallucinating now? You know, when you ask for a particular prompt. But this happens to be a infrared version done through Midjourney, and I asked to do an 850 nanometer infrared shot of a Roadster. And this is what it created. Now, what you'll find is that, and it's hilarious, in the back, if you could see it, they sometimes put exhaust tips, or it puts exhaust tips. There are too many louvers on the front there, the hood vanes. I think there's probably at least one extra. It can never get any kind of text correct. It tries to make it look like Tesla, but it leaves out some letters. So we're having a lot of fun with this. What it renders, though, is often at the level of quality that an artist would create, a commercial artist. So we're enjoying it and having fun with it. But that's what the image on the green screen for everybody in the background is. All right. So getting back to the link, yeah, you can see the products that Mark is talking about on that e-store. There's some pictures of it there. Mark, question for you. What's the future of OVMS? What are the next generation versions, or are you guys working on that currently?
The hardware is pretty stable now. We're happy with what it does. I think one thing happened with version 2 is that we started to get a lot of inquiries from people who wanted to support other cars. So version 1 was just a Roadster. And version 2 started to add support for, I think the first extra car was the Renault Twizy.
Okay.
And one of the main project leads now, another Michael, in Germany this time, he did the most amazing Twizy implementation. I mean, he didn't just support what we did in the Roadster of, what's your SoC and what's the deep, but he supported reprogramming the motor controllers in the vehicle for things like acceleration curve and top speed. And I don't think Renault were very happy.
Amazing.
So, there's this thing when you put your foot maximum on the accelerator, there's obviously an algorithm in the controller. It doesn't apply 100% of power to the motor because your wheels would spin and you'd probably overturn the car, or at least do a wheelie in the Twizy.
Right.
But that sort of, that torque curve you can program by reprogramming the motor controller. So he did this, and then a few years after we started doing that, and Renault got, I think they encrypted in the software updates to stop people doing it. But it was a good few years in the meantime. So over the years now, we're supporting more than a dozen different sorts of car. And each car would typically have a few developers working on its support. For instance, I did some work on the Model S, where the original Model S, using the Baolong system, couldn't show the tire pressure on the car, which I found frustrating as hell. I mean, for some reason, the later Model S's would show the tire pressure, and I found this frustrating. And pretty quickly, I found the codes to see the tire pressure. So they exist on the car communication bus, just for some reason, Tesla and Infinite Wisdom don't show it. And then I think about the time I was doing the TPMS for the Roadster, I said, well, I wonder if I can reprogram the IDs in the Model S as well. And for that, it's on the CAN bus. And I spent one weekend and I started, I sent the commands to query the ECU on it. And it came back and said, we need a password. And I said, who would put a password on a TPMS controller? But anyway, so I cracked the password. It wasn't a very complicated algorithm. In the end, it turned to be less than 16 bits. I mean, and it was terrible. It was hardly worth adding a password or encryption on that control at all, given the level of what they did. But anyway, they did it. It's capital R, little r, if anyone wants to know.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So we've got a few questions popping up here. Instagram, Bam oh, we already did that one. Okay. YouTube, Ingemar Anderson, an author that wrote a book that we did a forward on.
Yeah, it's called The Future is Electric.
Yes. Welcome, Ingemar. He says, greetings from Seattle. Great show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Instagram, Suleiman Milani, best people, best wishes for this aftermarket product, I think is what he's saying.
I think so.
We have an international audience here too, by the way, Mark. They come in from all over the world and it's fascinating. We usually ask people, tell us where you're from.
Yeah, I mean, we've had New Zealand, Australia, Germany, Belgium, Hong Kong,
Africa, it goes on.
yeah.
Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, definitely. Australia, of course, various parts of Asia as well.
On Instagram, Voiborov asks, is there a franchise option for Canada/overseas markets?
And I don't know if Voiborov is if he's talking about the OVMS product or our service capability. A lot of the visitors here are coming into Gruber Motor Company, and they're usually interested in, can we service equipment or service cars outside our service center. We don't have a franchise program yet. We just don't have enough bandwidth to create anything like that at this
Right.
point. We're so busy repairing Roadsters, basically.
It does feel like drinking from a fire hose an awful lot of the time.
That's a good analogy. Yes. YouTube, Cool Abe. He says, "Yep, I'm here now. Thank you for joining us." And then he comments on the picture behind us here with the AI-generated infrared picture. He said, "You should try letting AI make people eating pizza." He said it's pretty spooky. And, he's right. I subscribe to one of these Facebook art, AI art sites.
Yeah.
And what that capability will conjure is just remarkable. It's way outside the box. It's the things that you just don't normally imagine,
Oh, I'm sure we could really confuse AI with a lot of the double meanings that we put into all of our words in life.
Right. By the way, Mark, do you guys use AI for anything?
Yeah, we do for some sort of my day job as computer security. We use it for analyzing events and things and trying to correlate. But it's interesting. I mean, I did my postgraduate research in AI, and it's kind of scary at times. It's a very bizarre. It behaves. Sometimes it's just scarily how it behaves, and other times it's just disappointing.
Right.
It gets it wrong, and it doesn't know it got it wrong. So, but it's really coming along very, very quickly now. So, hopefully in the next few years we'll see a bit more predictability in what it's doing.
Right. I heard something yesterday from an Israeli scientist who was basically saying that for 4 billion years we've been evolving organic life forms. We need to get ready to adopt and coexist with inorganic life forms.
Yeah, I mean, how far away do you think we are from a sentient program?
May already be there, as the conspiracy theorists
I have
speculate.
one story from my 30 years ago plus, with the beginning of AI, where I was looking into this, and some other people were working with these things, and somebody was working with a very early algorithm, one of these neural networks. So it's trying to mimic the brain by connecting these neurons with weights in layers. Right. And on the input side, he plugged in a microphone. On the output side, he plugged in a speaker. And then he spoke to the machine, and he just, said hello, trying to teach it language. And then on the output side, one day, this thing said, "Mama."
Oh, my God.
Oh, wow.
And it's literally just picking up syllables and repeating syllables and whatever. And that, "Mama" and "Dada" are one of the first things that an AI model like that will say.
Amazing.
It's kind of scary, but in reality, it's just random, and that's what a small child says as well.
Right.
Sure. Absolutely. I have a question for you, Mark, as well. It's not so much about Roadster stuff as it is about some of the other projects you have going on. I know that you are a leader of a group called Charged Hong Kong. Sounds like it was a small company, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? I'd like to give you a forum to kind of let our listeners know what you have going on there.
Yeah, that was formed, a group of 5 of us formed it about 10 years ago plus. It's kind of model. It's very similar to Your Plug in America. Mm-hmm. So it's a non-profit. It's a registered charity in Hong Kong. And we're basically just trying to help people adopt EVs. So we talk to charging providers and government and give our advice, and we try to represent the community of electric vehicle owners and operators. And the end goal of the organization is to basically put itself out of business. We want to get to the level where we're no longer required, and electric vehicles are the correct way of doing it.
Sure, by all means. It's it seems like the world is inexorably moving that direction, but it's fits and starts, man. There's, on even here in the United States, you've got California banning electric vehicles within the next 15 years, and then people over in Texas and in the south central United States trying to ban electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
but it's happening very
banning it.
quickly here. I can say
Is it?
if you look just across the border, there's a southern city in China called Shenzhen or Shenzhen,
Uh-huh.
how you pronounce it. And they have managed to 100% electrify their buses.
Really?
This is not just,
Mhm.
most people say, okay, 100% of new buses. This is 100% of all buses
Mm-hmm.
in the city. And 99% of their taxis are now electric. In Hong Kong last month, we hit about 2/3 of new cars registered, private cars, are electric in Hong Kong.
That's
Which is pretty amazing.
amazing. I mean, Shenzhen is one of the sources for, with one of our sister companies, Gruber Power Services. We get a lot of batteries from there, and Shenzhen is a huge city. Isn't it like 20 million plus people? So it's not like a little town we're talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley of China. I mean, it's an amazing place, and we deal with a guy called Chen there, who is kind of a facilitator for VMS, and another guy called Jason. And these guys, you give them a project, and they'll go off and find factories, they'll find suppliers, they'll find all these things, and just facilitate getting things built. And it's just a city of millions of entrepreneurs.
That is just amazing. Pete, I see you pulling up a picture on your screen.
And I wanted Mark to tell us about his Roadster. VIN 915, right?
I can't remember. I thought it was 567. I can't remember. I had to sell it a few years ago. It got a bit ridiculous. I mean, my kids have grown up now, or are growing up.
Yeah.
It was easy at the beginning. I'd drop a kid off at kindergarten and go to work, because my Roadster was my daily driver here.
Okay.
But then it got to the stage where I got two kids in school.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'd have to drive one to school in the passenger seat, and I have to drive home, pick up the other one, and drive this other one to the same school.
Right. Hey guys, we have
So
that image.
I had to switch. Yeah.
It's on the EV Share under customers and then Mark's name, and the image file is RAEPEAA. If we can bring that up.
I don't have the EV Share on the slide.
Oh, you don't have it. Okay. All right. Looks like Thunder Gray Roadster though.
Yes, it's something about gray. It's not black. It's not white.
In between, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Tell me again, because I think I can get it.
It's on the EV Share, customers, and then Mark's folder, and it's RAE is the name of the file, and there's another picture of it there too. We can see a nice shot of it driving in Hong Kong. It looks like there's some other Roadsters there. You were doing a rally at one point in time. We'll see if we can pop some of those images up for our audience.
I'm in the folder now. One more time. What's the file name?
Customers in the EV Share.
Yeah, what's the file name? I'm in his folder.
RAE.
RAE. Okay.
Yeah. And there's a young man standing there by your car. Is that one of your children?
Not one of mine. I think it's just because my car and all the Roadsters in Hong Kong were just used for shows and things, and we just show EVs basically. Because back in the 2011, 2012, 2013, there was people thought EVs were toys.
Yeah.
So we were showing that these cars exist every day. I think the rally we did was quite interesting because some guys in the UK had done, I think it's John O'Groats to Land's End, which is the bottom left of UK up to the top right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I mean, in US sizes, it's not enormous. I think it's 600 miles, 700 miles or something. But they basically drove a Tesla Roadster in response to a BBC trying to drive an electric Mini.
Sure.
The same route and having an awful time. They drove a Tesla Roadster to show that it's possible.
Right.
So we decided to do a rally around Hong Kong. We had about a dozen Roadsters, and we drove all the way around Hong Kong, which is actually only about 200 kilometers. So what's that, 120 miles or something?
Right.
Oh.
It's literally circumnavigating Hong Kong. And we had a great time doing it. And at each stop, because you can't sit in a Roadster all day long.
True.
So we drive for an hour and stop and have lunch or high tea or whatever, breakfast.
Sure.
And show off the cars.
Did you guys find that image?
Downloading it right now.
Oh,
While
downloading,
while
okay.
Jesse is downloading and getting that image ready, I do have another question for you. This one comes from, if there are probably a lot of people that are familiar with the Quora forum. Quora is simply a good question and answer forum. Mark, I looked at some of those questions and answers you had, and I was fascinated by it. I loved the answers that you gave, where you included the three barn find Chinese roadsters that are in sea containers. And there's one question from a little while ago, though, I thought was so compelling for what we talk about here on the podcast that I wanted to ask you live as well. Why do some people believe electric cars are good for the environment?
Yeah, I think the answer I get, I mean, Quora is interesting because, I mean, there's a lot of social media, but the answers you give disappear. So you get somebody posting some dumb video of a picture of a lithium mine, which actually isn't a lithium mine. And,
Yeah.
it's just so much just misinformation and just evil disinformation being spread. That Quora is interesting because I find that the questions, sometimes they're done by trolls, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but other times that people just genuinely want to know, and you can spend some time and write a proper answer, and it surfaces. The
Mhm.
crud answers people downvote, and the good answers people upvote. And in reality, the majority of people are sensible people with sensible viewpoints who don't believe the Earth is flat.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I find that Quora gets it. So I think my answer to that was, EVs are not clean, but they're cleaner than the competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a good point. That is definitely such a good point.
Can you see that image, Mark? That's the one that I
Yes.
enjoyed. Yeah.
So I think this was one of our Charged Hong Kong rallies or demonstrations. We're at the Science Park, which is kind of like a big incubator in Hong
Uh-huh.
Kong. And we're showing off the cars. They let us park them there, and we went and had a meal, I think.
And there's a
So a
very
lot of
young,
passers-by would just come and see these cars.
yeah.
The Roadsters were just like magnets. You see these Model S's. I've got no one looking at them, but the Roadster just
Right.
sucks up passers-by.
And there's a young man being inspired and probably will be a lifelong auto enthusiast from this point forward.
Yeah, well, I
Fascinating.
remember doing a school one where we took this car to a school, and I mean, you got like 200 kids just really enjoying the cars and seeing, and being amazed when you open up the Model S frunk and there's no engine. Where's the engine? And so you got like 50 kids crawling around the car trying to find the engine.
Right.
And I remember this one kid comes up to me, and I think the headmaster's standing next to me. The kid says, "That's a Tesla Roadster." I said, "Yes, that's right." And he says, it was first made in 2009 or 2008. I said, "Yeah, that's correct." He says, "And it's got 6,831 batteries in it."
Uh-huh.
And I'm just like, wow, this
Wow.
kid knows more than me.
He had done his homework. Yeah. Mark, there are pictures of roadsters in Hong Kong that are bricked, a large collection of them. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I wasn't very happy with that picture getting leaked because it's from a private premises.
Is
So
it?
obviously somebody could get into trouble for leaking that picture, and
Right.
so yeah. I mean, it's not good to go into somebody's premises and take pictures and publish them. But anyway, it happened, and
Sure.
I mean that's a test. I mean, I think everybody knows it's a Tesla storage facility
Uh-huh.
where they're waiting for batteries. The good news is most of them have actually now been resolved. Either they've been purchased back by Tesla for parts, like you do in the US, or they've been, had the batteries replaced or repaired.
Mm-hmm.
Here, Tesla were incredibly helpful to the owners. I mean, they would offer 3 levels here, and they would offer at one point they were offering at least cutting, as you do. If you got one individual cell,
Mm-hmm.
Tesla would snip it out and then put your car back on the road.
Interesting.
Or they would do sheet level replacements, and then finally they'll do an entire pack level replacement, including the version 3 packs.
That differs a bit from what they do in the States here. Here at the service center level, it's strictly a pack replacement. And, back at Lathrop at the Reman Center, they definitely can repair or do that type of repair. But, yeah, it's strictly replacement here. Well, that's good news. So some of these roadsters are getting put back on the road then, it sounds like.
Yes, I mean there's still not many on the road here now. I mean, it's the cars are quite old here. I think they first came in 2010 or 2011,
Hmm.
so it's they're getting quite old here, and the environment here is not particularly good. It's by the seaside, so it's very salt air,
Ah,
and it's very, very hot here. In the summer it's 35 Celsius, I guess, similar to Phoenix actually.
yeah,
Yeah, that is pretty
and
similar.
but and very humid. So
yeah.
it's we had I think the biggest failure in Hong Kong we've had is probably that little 400-volt controller in the front.
Yeah.
When it gets wet, it can fail, and yeah, that's the most common failure people have had here.
Yeah, we've actually resorted to weatherproofing those in order to prevent that from happening. In fact, one of the qualifying questions
Hmm.
for a Roadster owner when the cars are shipped to us is what kind of climate are they in? And yeah, you can take some precautions. The other one that's not weatherproof is the charge port door. When we open
Yes.
those, the first indication is the LEDs don't light, or they're the wrong color, or they're off completely. And once you open them up, oh my God, you'll find some real corrosion inside there. Chips actually corroded off the board, for example. There's a little TVSS chip on there that will corrode. But yeah, it depends on the climate as to whether we recommend that weatherproofing. We have a car here right now, the Roadster. I forget the VIN. It's the World Traveling Roadster. It went around the world in
Mm.
2012, and
Yeah,
it got
Raphael's car. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
Raphael's car, yeah. And it received its new battery, its replacement battery, after it got bricked in a Munich museum, and then made its way on an ocean voyage across the Atlantic on a clipper ship, unmotorized clipper ship. Got stuck off the coast of Cuba because of unfavorable winds for about 2 weeks. They couldn't just fire up the diesel engine and go on to Miami. But and then unfortunately it went overland transport before the Tesla semis were available, and it wasn't quite emission-free transportation at that point. But the car is currently it has its new battery, and we're definitely going to weatherproof that car so that it can continue its travels. And actually, 2 days ago was the 11-year anniversary of that round the world trip completion. So it was
I did not know that.
yeah, that was notable.
Yeah, Raphael, he came to Hong Kong at one point because he couldn't drive through Hong Kong.
Yeah,
But he had to come here to get his China visa and stuff for the China side, and we met up with him, and really nice guy, and an amazing ambassador for EVs. So the original, when he did that original trip around the world, he actually had an OVMS in the car, and we coded up a special web page for him, which would publish his GPS location and speed and charge status as he drove around the world.
Yeah, well, that's good to know because we're reactivating all of that in the car currently, and so that is a modified version of OVMS then.
It was a standard OVMS. It was just on the server side. We just did some code to be able to specifically support his car and make, because normally the information like your location, your speed is very private.
Right.
We don't publish it.
Right.
Oh, sure.
So we, with his permission or with his instruction, we actually made a little website so people could track his car.
Very cool. You'll probably do that again.
It's been very amazing. I know when my car was sent to, because my car was sold in Hong Kong, and actually the guy sold it on to a man in Australia, is where it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because he left the OVMS in the car, and he got loaded onto a container in Hong Kong, and then onto a ship. And as the container ship traveled from Hong Kong to Australia, whenever it came near a coastline, it picked up a cellular signal, and we could track where the car was and how it was progressing.
Interesting.
It was quite interesting.
Yeah. So, Mark, what do you think of these 3 Tesla Roadster barn find cars?
I'm not very confident on the state of the battery.
All right.
I think even if they unplugged the service connector, and even if it was 50%, whatever, I think after 13 years or something, the chances of the battery being good are dubious.
Yeah.
But everything else in the car, apart from the 2 batteries, it should be amazing. I mean, I guess they've got almost no miles on them.
Yeah, and the first batch of people that wanted to buy them thought that they were going to turn it into a daily driver, and I pointed out, this isn't the type of car that you'd want to do that with, because it's going to sell above market, first of all, And its value is in the fact that it has no miles. It was never, registered. It never went into ownership. Currently, the price is beyond where anybody, I think, would try to turn that into a driver. All three of them now are the bid is up to $750,000, so $250 a piece, and hopefully they'll be in a collection, in someone's collection at this point. But yeah, we talked to Conrad Buck. He's a Roadster repair type organization in Germany, Kassel, Germany. And we were kind of discussing this about the battery. Is it possible after 13 years that you would have any life left if the service plug was pulled? And I pointed out that we had one sitting here for a year and a half, and we were shocked that the SOC wasn't that much different than when we pulled a service plug after a year and a half. He then said, well, I had a Roadster with a service plug pulled that after 6 years still had life in the battery. So anyway, there's a glimmer of hope, but certainly not very optimistic like you that these batteries are any good. But the other question that we get with these people trying to buy the car, so how do I get a battery? And I'm saying, well, why would you want to get a battery if you're not going to drive it, And then they talk about deferred maintenance in the car. Should I get the PEM upgraded, rebuilt, and all that? And it would seem to me that this would be more like a Picasso on the wall somewhere rather than something that you're actually going to drive.
By all means, I my feeling is you could make the investment, get the PEM upgrade done, make the investment, get the battery done, and then not only lose out the dollars that you spent on those investments, but lose another $70,000 besides because you just turned a masterpiece Roadster into something very common.
Right. Mark, I realize that you are very early morning, and by the way, I want to thank Mark. This is not 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time like it is here. Mark is actually there in the middle of the night. I hope he's got coffee with him. But there are a few questions that I thought we could entertain before we let you go to sleep, Mark. So One of them is YouTube, Stephen Rose. He says, does Mark offer a device to control Tesla motors for do-it-yourself electric conversion projects? What advice would you give him?
Well, the OVMS has been used in some do-it-yourself conversions. So they've added it, and they've added on their own vehicle support for it. So yes, OVMS can be used to add telemetry. I don't think anybody's used it as a VMS or a motor control or anything. Although in theory it could do it.
It could do that.
That's not our primary. Our primary goal is to be a telemetry device.
Okay.
So, but certainly could operate with a third party, a DIY build. And the biggest problem we have is with adding support for vehicles is getting the information from the vehicle manufacturer, which typically they won't release anything about what the codes are. Right. So some people think this is just great fun, and I'm one of those. I think reverse engineering the messages on the CAN bus is just so much fun. It's like a puzzle, and it's I guess my day job gets involved where it's fun to crack these things,
right,
or to solve the puzzle. But other people just find it a pain in the neck. They'd rather just have like a full list of the codes. But for DIY conversion, of course, you already know all the codes, so that's the hardest part of coding support for vehicle.
Sure, by all means. I'm a guy with an IT background as well, and I will admit it kind of takes a special type of person to go in and decode machine language, and the CAN bus codes are not that far off from the machine language.
Interesting. So we've got Instagram. Ashir bin Usman is joining us. He says, wow, dream company, sir, from United Arab Emirates. He says, Tesla changed the entire history of the automobile world. Good point.
Good point. Lightning Rod has joined us from Thunder Bay. Lightning Rod is a regular contributor on the comments. Says, I want a franchise. The world is desperately looking for choices that are not being offered by anyone. I've been the owner of a shop for over a decade, and I'm looking for a pathway to move forward into the 21st century. Aside from Jehu Garcia and all that he does, there are just not a lot of choices.
That is true, Lightning Rod. And by the way, you mentioned Yehu Garcia. Mike Aldia, actually, a couple days ago, recommended that we get a hold of him because he's definitely a innovator in the EV space. And it looks like we're going to be setting up a podcast guest appearance for Yehu Garcia soon. So stay tuned for that as well. All right. How are you holding up, Mark? Are you okay?
Yeah, no problem. I'm good.
Okay.
Pete?
Yeah.
Do you want me to pull up some of the images in Dropbox and just have them on the screen? You guys can talk about them as we go through, or do you have any specific ones you want me to pull up? Because there's about 20 images in there that we haven't gone through.
How long can you pop each one up, and maybe Mark can comment on it?
Yeah, I can pull them up for as long as you want. And just so you know, we are now at 1 hour exactly.
Okay.
So I will pull some of those up.
All right. Yeah, Mark was kind enough to send us a bunch of vintage images of the OVMS development.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get those up on the screen, if you see anything there, Mark, feel free to comment on it. While he's doing that, we've got a YouTube comment from Lightning Rod. He says, wow, just the base level knowledge I get out of these podcasts is amazing. Where else are you going to hear information like this? Well, thank you, Lightning Rod.
Thank you very much.
And it's the quality of our guests that really make these so informative. There you go, Mark. Can you see that?
Yep. So that is version 1 of OVMS. You can see the microcontroller and a little CAN bus chip, and that's pretty much it. So there was no modem. That actually plugged into a modem board, which was a standard modem board.
I see.
But that was the original OVMS, and it's about, I think, about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches square.
Mm-hmm.
A very small little thing. That's the original iPhone app, the prototype for it, and you can see that's my Roadster.
Okay, the 915. Okay.
Can't we see what that is? Oh yeah, this was a poll we did to give you some idea of, very early days Roadster. We announced the project and we said, was anybody interested in doing it? And you can see the sort of percentage of people who are not just interested in the product, but interested in helping out developing the product. And that's how we grew to, more than 100 developers working on the product over the years.
And, we find that common in the Roadster community. It's pioneers like yourselves, innovators and volunteers that really create continue the support basically for the Tesla Roadster. Good job, guys.
So that's again the version 1, the very early hand-assembled one. So you can see the red board is we experimented with different colors. So I think the final result was red we chose because it's kind of like stands out. It was very Christmassy as well, which was the time. And then the big modem board underneath it.
Got it. Okay.
That is the modem board from version 1, the prototype. So it's a standard prototyping modem board. So we didn't change that at all. We just bought those off the shelf, basically.
And that's why you had was probably an unused serial port sitting off the back of it?
I really can't remember. One was the expansion connector. The telephone connector was actually the vehicle cable. We used the telephone connector for some reason. And I think the others, the programming pins and things. But there was not a lot of expansion. This is one serial port. You can see the labels were hand printed.
Right.
And these were all, a standard plastic case. And they were very early days. It was a pain in the neck. So now we're getting into version 2. So this is much nicer. So here we have the OVMS, on the left, I can explain the board. On the top left, you've got the power coming in and we've got a power regulator. Then you've got a SIM card slot beneath that. And then next to it, the white and red is the actual modem chip. So this is a modem module, which will deal with all the cellular stuff. So we don't need to deal with it. And then what's not shown is on the underside of the board is the PIC. So the microcontroller would be underneath. But this was all now in a little board, which was, I guess, about 3 inches square. And much more organized. And you see we've now got proper connectors for the expansion for the vehicle cable. So now we're not restricted just to Roadsters. Now with the vehicle cable, we can use different cables for different sorts of vehicles.
Okay.
And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Roadster, the architecture, these little OVMS boxes actually sat in underneath the passenger compartment near the vehicle management system type module, the VMS module. So it was out of the way. By the way, Mark, we had a audio upgrade done to a Roadster that came in, and because of all of the stuff they put in the car, they actually buried the OVMS unit and the VMS box. So that's a Roadster that we're going to have to disassemble a bit in order to do further work on it. So that does happen from time to time too. People don't realize you need access to some of those. So this is the cable
So
that connects.
that's the Roadster VT cable. Actually, it also works with V3. We've standardized so the cables work. Although in this case, it was this time it was just a single CAN bus. Version 3 introduced support for more than one CAN bus.
Okay.
And you can see on the right-hand side, you have the connector that plugs in the car, and then on the left-hand side, you have the one that goes into OVMS. So we have different cables for different sorts of cars now. And that's the version 2 OVMS. You see, that's one of my favorite cases. It's a metal case. It's got a GSM connector, and it's got also GPS for cars which don't. The Roadster doesn't need it, but for some cars, we've also got GPS on there, so we can track position even if the car doesn't have its own GPS. Mm-hmm. And I really like that design. We use that for many, many years. We have a partnership with a company called Hologram, who run a cellular network which works anywhere around the world. So you can stick that SIM in, and you pay a flat rate for data. And
okay.
They've been very good support for us. You don't have to use Hologram. You can use any cellular SIM card you want, but it's a lot of our users use Hologram because it's simple and cheap. This now is version 3 OVMS. So here we've gone back to the 2-board design. So the bottom board, the bigger one, is the Wi-Fi. It's got 3 CAN bus support. It's got basically everything for the general operation. And then on top of that, you can stack other boards. So the first board in the stack shown here is a modem board. So this is probably the 3G modem at the time. I guess this picture was taken. But you can take out the 3G modem and put a 4G modem board in. You can see that the connectors, the big line over these things called SIPs, they allow you to stack another board on top and another board on top and another board. So, as big as a case you can put on it. So you can put the K-line expansion board on top of this modem board to make a sandwich. And that's version 3. So this is the thing which we've had for many years now, version 3. This also was the first version that was certified. So we went through FCC and CE for Europe certification. So it's a fully certified. They put it in some radio room and they measure the emissions and they try to electrocute it and make sure it doesn't die.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Costs a phenomenal amount of money to get that done. It's a real pain.
Yes, I can imagine. And destructive.
So this was the first set, actually. Again, similar to the ones on the Christmas tree. Many years later, we produced a first set of, I think this was 10 or 20 modules, and the case in this case was 3D printed. So again, some guy in China just 3D printed us 20 cases. But now we have injection molded cases. The volume is enough to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And that's the injection molded. So that's the current product as it is today.
Okay. And that's a plastic case then?
Yeah. So, we have our own mold. And amazingly, the guys in China, they obviously, injection molding can be very expensive. But
sure.
For us, they just said, look, we got a similar case. We can modify it for you. And I said, well, while you're doing it, can you make the OVMS logo in the top? And they said, sure.
Very nice.
They just, they just CNC the metal away, and you end up with a nice embossed logo on the top of the case.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something we're heading towards now. So this gives you an example. I think this screen is actually from a Model S.
Okay.
But we're trying to do the same thing for a Roadster. So what this is this screen is supported in OVMS on several car types. What it's showing you is along the horizontal axis, you have in Roadster parlance, it would be brick, I think, right?
Right, brick, yes.
So they're in the Model S, I'm not sure what they call them, the car may have 16 modules, and each module may be a certain number of bricks. And this plots the voltage of each component of the battery, each brick of the battery, and shows you, so the dark green is the current voltage and the light green is the minimum and the maximum we've seen. So you can see how balanced your battery is. And then on the bottom, we've got temperature, again, either per module or sometimes it's less granularity. So at the moment for the Roadster, we're only using the first CAN bus, the diagnostic or the instrumentation bus. But actually, we've got 3 CAN buses. We've also got the one with the PEM on it and the one with the ESS, the battery on it. So we hope to be able to produce this same information for the Roadster. Up until now, we've kept away from those other 2 buses because they're kind of a bit more scary. Those buses, you could interfere with what the car does.
Right. During driving.
So, we've been a little bit scared of keeping away from them, but we are trying to use those, but at least the ESS bus at the moment, to get this information for Roadster owners. So I think you'll see that appear in the next few months.
So this BMS cell monitor graph that you're showing here, is this available currently for the Model S? There's an enormous amount of interest in battery health and monitoring for the Model S and the other platforms.
Yeah. So for the Model S and X, it's available.
Okay.
Although we have it, I should say it's got a bug in that it doesn't support some of them. There's kind of the way the code works is it waits because each of these modules is reported as an individual CAN message, and it waits for all the modules to report before it shows you the chart. Right?
Okay.
But on some of the Model S's and X's, Tesla have now got some weird battery pack in them that is missing modules. So it'll have like module 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. But 2 would be missing in the middle. I guess like the 75 kilowatt hour Model X is operated that way. Some of the retrofitted Model S's have had bigger battery packs put on, but some of the modules are turned off to make it an 85 kilowatt hour battery.
Interesting.
So, we're working on that. It's just a small software fix, and we're working on that at the moment to try to support those other Model S's. But the basic Model S's it supports in the Model X quite well.
This will be a very popular product. We're looking forward to getting a finished version of that, trying it, and then making it available. And then we've got the box
the
that comes
board,
in.
I think.
Oh, the K-line board.
That's
there you go.
That's the K-line. Yeah.
The option kit. Okay.
That's the option kit. You can see it comes with headers if you want to extend. Yeah.
I see.
And little standoffs that plugs in. And that was I think that was an April Fool's. I don't know if you can kind of see it.
This is the vehicle display screen in the Tesla Roadster, yes.
Yeah, and we're working out that actually there's a facility where you can send basically the OVMS behaves like this actual VDS. The OVMS just acts like a remote VDS. So the VMS doesn't know, when you stop a charge, you can either stop it by pressing stop charge on the VDS, this little screen, or you can press it by, OVMS doing it. But it's pretty much the same. The VMS doesn't understand the difference. So what we have here is an alert message produced by OVMS and displayed on the VDS. We found out you can actually display textual alert messages. The Roadster has support. I don't think the VMS uses it today, although alert messages are coded. But this one is you can actually display text on the VDS screen.
Good work. Yep. Okay. Now, where's this? Hong Kong?
That's the rally we had. This is one of the main thoroughfares in Hong Kong, in a place called Mong Kok. And it's that's my car in the front. And this was a crazy Tesla senior salesman. Now he's kind of in charge of sales. I don't want to name him, but he was basically hanging out the back of a Roadster taking pictures of us driving around Hong Kong. I think he lost 3 hats on that trip.
It's easy to do. It's a convertible, yeah.
And that's my car on display. We had an electric vehicle show in this place called Wishing Tree, which is a fantastic place in the northern part of Hong Kong, quite close to China. And we got a whole bunch we partnered with the people who brought Formula E to Hong Kong. And they set up this show, and we had Nissan, and we had BMW, and all the EV manufacturers sent cars. We just parked them on the grass with some little tent booths up, and then we had a little I don't want to call it a racetrack because racing would be illegal in Hong Kong, but we had a circuit you could drive leisurely around, and definitely not time how long it took you to get around the circuit. But it was great fun because people could take their own cars on that circuit and drive around the circuit and see how they behaved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one we saw before. Another show. So the Roadsters in general were used in a lot of these shows in Hong Kong. Just demonstrate to people. That's again the same Wishing Tree show. These were actually stewardesses. I think one of the sponsors was one of the airlines. I think it may be Hong Kong Airlines or Oasis, or I'm not sure. And these were stewardesses or air hostesses from the show who dressed up as traditional village people. And that's myself standing in front of it.
Right.
The most ugly thing in the picture. The most ugly thing in the picture.
The most prominent, yes.
All right,
Yes.
that is everything in the Dropbox.
Oh, we got all the pictures. Okay. We've got a few questions here. A lot of praise for Yehu Garcia. It looks like we've made a good choice. Thank you, Michael Aldia, for recommending him. We'll see if we can schedule him on a podcast. One final question, Mark, Instagram, 8Click Outside. He says, why are there so many cars in for repair? And he's talking about our service center. How long does the average a repair take? What does the average repair cost? A lot of variations in that. This morning, by the way, 15 minutes before this podcast, I got a call and they said, our Florida Roadster just arrived. It was rapidly getting bricked because of a resistive cell. Mark, this car was losing 12 miles a day. That's how quickly that resistive cell was pulling down that pack. So we knew it would be bricked by the time it got here, locked, and we ended up letting her drive it on a transporter 5 days ago or so, and sure enough, I had to use the forklift and get it off and get it into the shop. But to answer the question, the Roadsters need repairs. They are aging. There are upgrades that need to be done, and they come in from all over the United States. How long it takes is dependent on the upgrades the customer wants after a repair. And oftentimes they feel, while it's here, let's get that PEM rebuilt and upgraded.
Right.
And I'd like some carbon fiber, and I'd like some suspension changes, and it just goes on and on. And the average cost, there is no average. It really does vary. For those of you interested, there are some costs on our website, grubermotors.com, and a pretty good description of virtually every service that we offer and the upgrades that we offer. And prices are attached to everything there, including in the e-store.
On YouTube, Trucker Alistair has a shout out to us, so we want to. He's one of our regular commenters. Nice as always, he says. Greetings. Today he's in Virginia. Yesterday I think he was in Alabama. Love you guys.
Thank you, Trucker. Mark, it has been a real pleasure having you on this show. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, really, thanks for having me. It's been a fun project, and just to let the Roadster owners know that we haven't forgotten them, unlike somebody else we could mention. And we're really hoping to get more and more functionality for the Roadster, particularly for remote diagnostics and maintenance. We've already used OVMS to sort of remotely get into the VMS and fix problems on some cars which have had problems, because these VMS in particular is getting old. And the systems we're seeing some corruptions and other issues, and so we're really trying to make the Roadster and the OVMS work together to be able to do similar sort of things that Tesla could do.
And by the way, the cooperation and support from Tesla with efforts like ours and yours continues to improve. We're very pleased with the amount of progress that we've been making, getting them to understand that this is a partnership. It's no longer, competitor versus competitor. It is more along the lines of supporting a community in their first generation cars. So I can say with certainty they're very grateful for what you guys do, what you do, and all of the innovators and volunteers out there like yourself that are developing products to keep the Roadsters functioning.
Yeah, we work very closely with them, and we've never had any. Yeah, they've been very supportive for what we do. I mean,
Yes.
they're incredibly helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys as well. And pretty much every third-party Tesla shop has been, very supportive of the VMS project, and we're very immensely grateful.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Mark. We'll certainly be in contact. And for those of you that want to see this session that might have missed it or missed a part of it, it will be available on our YouTube channel under live sessions. And you can review it at any time. Aaron does a good job of putting timestamps in there. So if there's a particular topic you want to extract or focus on, you can do that as well. This is Wednesday, so tomorrow we're going to have our general EV podcast. And what we're going to attempt to do is make every Thursday a guest appearance with someone in the industry, someone relevant to the type of work that we're doing regarding Tesla and Roadsters. Mark, again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. And thank you, our audience. We'll see you tomorrow.
Take care.